I'm super thrilled because I could sit down. This is the first time today. Awesome. So thank you guys so much for continuing to join us for the day. Again, I'm Dava Guthmiller, and one of the things we wanted to talk about today was sort of keeping our world healthy through design. And that can come across in sustainability in many different ways. Actually on Tuesday, we did a panel with Swiss Next where we talked about sustainability in the circular economy and how design at basically every touch point can impact how we're going to tackle some of these issues in the future. And we've been seeing sort of reports and trends, articles, everybody from Fast Company Design to Monocle, around how design is really going to be integral in changing how we move forward into this future. And even, I think it was BlackRock Investments last week, announced that they're going to be putting sustainability as part of their focus and even pulling out of investments that don't have sustainability as part of their plan. Obviously, a healthy world goes beyond sustainability, and these fine ladies on the stage with me have three very different sort of not even different opinions, but different design disciplines to sort of come at this approach in this conversation. So with me today, I have Manuela King down at the end, who is the principal and president of the landscape architecture firm RHAA. Full disclosure, she is also one of our clients. But she also has her own fragrance line, and I love a well-rounded woman, called Ghost. And she finds inspiration for living a creative life from one of her cousins, Andy Warhol. And then in the center, we have Sophie Maxwell, who is the Global Futures Director at Pearl Fisher. And she actually started her design career in fashion and likes to take inspiration from her design heroes like Marc Jacobs for doing things like reimagining heritage luxury. And then all the way from Zurich, we have Caroline Niebling, who actually joined me at the panel at Swiss Next. And she is a design and food futurist. I can't say that fast. And food is what really drives her to create because it's an ever-evolving substance that will never stop development. So, ladies, in thinking about a healthier world, one of the things I wanted to talk about first was some of the trends that you're seeing in consumer behavior that are really starting to drive sustainability and healthier choices in general or in your work specifically. And I'll start down with
me?
With Manuela.
Okay. Well, for those of you who don't know what a landscape architect is, we design everything that's outside of a building wall. So streets, cities, parks, waterfronts, campuses, academic campuses, schools, hospital grounds, we do it all. And if you think about the way the world is changing right now and sustainability, it has a direct impact on our profession, and our profession has a direct impact on it. So one thing that everybody is noticing is the online economic situation, that everybody now shops online. So the design of cities are radically changing because of that, and we're at the forefront of something like that. Everything now is about experience and authentic experience. So people don't go to Union Square as much to shop. They go there because they like to be around other people. And so our work is changing very much into how we can activate urban spaces, create places that are incredibly exciting for people, and weave in ecologies into it that protect the planet.
So has anybody been down in Union Square during all that crappy construction on Sacramento Street? So the green space that was covering up the construction.
That was my idea.
That was her idea. which was also really, really well used. So if you guys were in that space over the holidays or the last couple of years, utilizing sort of a construction zone and sort of bringing people together over that is a good example of
2
that.
million visitors in 2018, and with a 95% positive experience.
Awesome. Sophie, how about you? What trends are you seeing in consumer behavior?
Well, we work on, like many of you in the audience will do the same, on new to world brands and then the tier one brands, so brands at opposite ends of the scale. I think the thing we always do first is we look at it in the sort of broadest context, and it's really important to remember that we are actually living at a time in history where we're super lucky to be alive. I think any historian will tell you that we're living a far better, longer, healthier, safer, dependent on quite where you are in the world, but and much more interesting life than the generations that went before us. And what's brilliant also, and the reason that we're all here today, is obviously we live in the knowledge generation as well. So when we're creating brands now, I think the thing that we're super mindful of is the information that consumers want. So it's actually the accessibility of knowledge. It's the who made it, how did they make it, what with, how did it get to me, and what can I do with it next? So that full journey of a product is something that really more and more we are obligated to deliver to our consumers. Also, it's the involvement of them in that brand. So we used to be a lot happier to be at the end of the line, or we didn't really get the choice, we didn't even think about it. So we're designing more and more brands now where we bring our consumers into that journey of brand creation as well, and we're talking to them. And again, it's like yourselves, it's people at the more emergent end of the spectrum, the thought leaders, that are going to help us really create the best practice brand that we can. And the last thing, and I don't have a one word to encapsulate it, but I think would be just the term consumer itself. And we've tried, and we can't think of a better one, so I'm sure everyone between them can do that. But, just the thought of actually being a consumer, now it's a title that we've just accepted. I don't know if it's the right one anymore, because, that's the pushback is against that sort of mindless being in the mindset of consuming all the time, that we're not happy if we don't. So I think that sort of much more thoughtful process of brand creation is something that we're thinking of at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Consumerism means constant taking in and usually constant waste on the way out. Yeah. So, awesome. Caroline, how about you? How are you seeing consumer trends sort of changing or needs changing in the food system?
Well, it's quite funny because when I started doing a project it's called The Sausage of the Future. It's a book about how the sausage and the design of it can help us reduce the amount of meat we eat. I looked into what were the trends then, and I found that many of the trends were about faking meat or growing meat, but nobody was looking into alternatives for the existing industry. And I think what is so amazing about consumers these days is their adaptability to whatever we're throwing at them, because they have to switch so quick all the time. And I understand that sometimes it's also very difficult to find in the maze of new products coming out, like to choose a good product in there.
To choose the difference, or to even understand the difference.
To understand the difference, yeah.
Actually, our AV team in the back, can we get a rotation on these images? Because there's like a ton of them. Anyways, I'll keep going. But that kind of brings us to our point. The next point I had was education. What are your teams doing, or what are you doing in your design practices to help educate and then therefore create demand and understanding for these things that are creating a healthier planet? When you were doing your sausage project, is there an education level that you're seeing that we need to do a better job of, or how are you tackling the education side?
Yes, because what I heard often was when people did not like the idea of the sausage, it's like, we don't know what's in there. But, the stuff is in there, what you put in there. Like, it's not magically being in there, And that's really made me realize that we have been becoming so blindly trusting what is in our supermarkets. And I think that there is a really important part of the education that we can improve on and improve with. But yeah, basically that's it.
Yeah, I think too, one of the things you had mentioned to me about sausage was just the sustainability of sausage as a thing in its own right, that it is a way to preserve, it's a way to use the whole animal, and it doesn't have to be the waste product of an animal. So the education around how that could change is actually really interesting. Sophie, how about you? How are you guys tackling education and sort of understanding of sustainability demand?
I think it's a slow process. I mean, the agency I work for, Pearl Fisher, a large amount of the work that we do is actually creating packaging. So we've got a big job ahead of us. And I think our founding partner actually passed away last year, and one of her wishes was always that we designed ourselves out of a job. So at the moment, as the legacy to her, we're busy, bankrupting the company, trying to do that. But yeah, it's a really interesting time, I think, to be working in packaging, because obviously that is the issue that we need to solve. I think there's a lot of demonization. Everyone knows, obviously, about plastic and the fact that in some instances, it is still the best solution. But, there is a process of understanding ourselves and then taking the consumer on that journey. And there's some amazing initiatives starting to happen. I'm sure a lot of you have seen Loop now, the circular shopping platform, where they're creating better multi-use structures for fast-moving consumer goods. So you're seeing some of the big brands that we all know and have in our homes creating multi-use structures where you can refill your deodorants, your food packaging. You've got Häagen-Dazs creating a metallized tin that you can refill with ice cream. So we'll see, obviously, how that starts to progress. And then some other really interesting initiatives where you're getting fruit, which was, I remember presenting a few years ago now, and I showed this horror show picture of a banana in a vending machine, and then the little tag on it, it said that it had vitamin B in it, so it was good for you. And you just think, how has this happened in society, that we've become so disconnected from our food that we need to be told that banana's good for us and have it delivered via a vending machine? But we're seeing sort of interesting packaging being developed where there's kind of a protective skin being put around fruit, which not only protects it, but also lets it last a lot longer. So I think, again, it goes back to the consummation point of making these things last as long as possible, and just education around, say, if you don't want to use a piece of fruit or food at one point in its life, you could use it later for something else and consume it, eat it in a different way. So,
yeah, we talked about this a little bit last night, especially with food, of trends like ugly produce, or, learning that the expiration date is not necessarily mandatory, but that education level of that things are good for a little bit longer than you think that they are. And even at Noise, we've been looking at trends around what I like to call naked products. So those things that the toothpaste and the mouthwash and those things that get shipped without water, or ideally without packaging, the shampoos and the solid shampoos and conditioners, those kinds of things that we can sort of, again, work ourselves out of a job. Yeah. But then it also means that the product itself has to be designed in a way that people understand what it is outside of its packaging.
Absolutely.
Manuela, how are you guys handling education in your space? I know that you do a lot of work around what was at the space prior or the materials you've used, but how are you educating consumers in landscape?
So I think that education in my discipline comes into two ways: educating clients and then educating users. So at this point, I would say probably 80% of our clients are extremely focused on sustainability. There are a lot of metrics in the architectural industry that define what a measure of sustainability is, and most of the clients are very aware of that, and if they're not, we make them aware. The big question is the user. And the user of a public space or a park or a public realm or a school is usually not very aware of why things are the way they are. And a lot of decisions, design decisions, are made for sustainable reasons. So we try as much as we can to integrate interpretation and curriculum of schools into the designs of our finished products.
Awesome. One of the things, I mean, kind of staying on the landscape side, I mean, the trend in the last few years has been, the majority of people are really moving to urban centers. No, I mean, I come from a really small town, and I did not want to move back there. So I am part of that trend. And I think, as the trend of urban living is becoming more and more a thing, the infrastructure and the processes and the systems around the things we need to do for a healthy world really have to change. I would love to know from each of you if urban living and sort of density of living is affecting how you are dealing with design challenges.
It's definitely affecting our discipline. We see with urbanization comes the need for respite. People are living in smaller spaces. They don't have contact with nature. And I don't know about everyone here, but for me, nature's a healer. If you're stressed or anxious, getting out in a natural environment is really important. So how can we integrate nature into these urban environments? A lot of things that are happening now are going up on the roof. You saw up here, there's a roof that can be occupied. It's not very green, but it could be. And finding nature in unexpected places is really important. And then obviously ecosystems, ecological design, ecological cities is a big trend. And how can we address climate change, sea level rise, warming temperatures, water collection, all in the urban environment are critical.
Caroline, how do you see density of people affecting food systems?
Not always for the better at first, but I think what I see is most of the time a problem is that we move so far away from where the food is made that you also distance yourself from it, and that makes it easier to throw stuff away because you care a lot less for it. And I think food it's such a magical thing that we need every day, again and again and again, but also culturally to cook together or to make something. It's like meditation on its own. And I think the more dense the cities are, the less space there is to create food together or even like have the rooftop farms.
We have those, yes.
Yeah, those type of solutions, they really make a lot of sense to get people a little bit closer to what they're eating again.
You mentioned on Tuesday, I think it was you that mentioned this about the trash fee.
Yeah.
Was that you? So, and I think that this is a good point about density of people. Do you want to mention that?
Yeah, so in Switzerland, what they have is very expensive trash bags. And those are tax included. And at the same time, you have recycling centers, and every big supermarket has them. So if you want, you can recycle everything and then use, like very sparsely, a trash bag. But if you don't care about it, then you just fill up that trash bag. And I think it's a very good system because like this, you get the people involved in what they're doing because they're actively spending more or less.
What is the fee for a trash bag?
It's like $2.50 a bag.
How would you guys feel about $2.50 a bag for a trash bag?
35 liters. So that's like a bag like this.
Which means that the infrastructure has to be there for the recycling centers. The education has to be there to explain to people the difference and how to actually recycle. And also then just like the societal motivation to kind of get it done, right? So.
Yeah, and in this case, like saving money is still a motivator. So in this case, you can by recycling. So it's sort of a win-win.
How are you seeing urban density hitting the effective brands?
Yeah, I think, there's some the philosophy of it, I think that Carolina and Manuela have covered really well. I think whenever you get problems like this, you see some really interesting creative solutions starting to come to market, and that's what we're seeing, I think, as a reaction to things like this. So some of the products examples I can think of as a vodka made out of fog and out of, decarbonated air, and also the kind of urban farms that are springing up now. There's one example that we absolutely love, one called Farm One, that's in New York. And they are an urban farm. They now supply about 14 different Michelin star restaurants, and they've started creating new types of herbs or bringing back ones that had actually died out. And I know Rob Lang, that owns it, said his sort of finest moment was that he'd given to Thomas Keller of the French Laundry some herbs and tastes that he'd never had before, so
All from the urban farm?
from an urban farm. And he just said, obviously farming is about farming land, and he feels like that's about disused basements in New York. He made the decision to do it in New York rather than Brooklyn, where you might have seen sort of traditional pop-ups happening, just so that he could get all of these herbs and salads to the restaurants by bike and by subway. So, you see that sort of creativity happening whenever there's a problem, I think, in that way. But just sort of looking at some of the examples that I know we put together to show you today, I think there's also the issue of ownership. And one of the examples up on the screen is a brand called Volbeck, who've started making clothes that last for a really long time. So they're looking at the materials they're using, and they're using things like Kevlar and graphene in their clothing, which I haven't seen anyone else doing yet. I'm sure that other people are onto it, but they've got a 100-year sweatshirt, which is supposed to live longer than you do. So you would just have one, and you don't need the amount of stuff that we've all got with all of the sort of stuffication that we're suffering from.
Yeah, Manuela, how is materials and longevity of the things that you need to produce sort of affecting sustainability?
Absolutely, materials are critical. And for those of you who know LEED is a criteria that they identify how sustainable buildings are. And there are requirements for materials both for, are they sourced locally? What is the longevity of them? Are chemicals required for maintenance? Can they be recycled or reclaimed? Can you use reclaimed lumber instead of traditional lumber? So it's really, everything we do is with a sustainable focus. And in addition, we have to pick materials that have low reflectance so that we aren't increasing the temperature in cities. Or high reflectance. High reflectance.
To keep the temperature down.
To keep the temperature down.
And you're also doing things like drainage systems that are collecting water and
Exactly.
natural plants that are native to the areas and all of those kinds of things.
Yes.
So looking forward to a healthier world, what are some of the things that each of you are the most excited about? Caroline, do you have something that you're really excited about in food?
Yes, diversity. I'm so excited once we have understood that when quinoa, for example, gets a hype, there are at least 20 more similar seeds that are as nutritious and are great for the environment. And it's actually much better to grow different crops close to each other for the biodiversity. And I, for one, I cannot wait until we have gained back a little bit more of the knowledge that we now have given to the industry to trust them to put the right stuff in the supermarkets, which I think, it's too limited for what is all edible around us. And I think diversity for me, super exciting.
I mean, it's good for the soil, but it's also way more tasty if you're eating things in season. Unless you're, there's also the growing rise of indoor farming and those kinds of things, using less water, less soil, but...
Yeah, and in season, but also locally. In terms of peppers or apples, I heard that Hawaii has 88 different types of avocados.
Wow.
And we're eating maximum 3 types?
Has anybody tried 88 kinds of avocados? You're my hero if you totally have. That's awesome.
Mine too.
Sophie, what are you looking at as a futurist? What are you, and trends, what are the things you're most excited about seeing for a healthy planet?
I think at the moment, Carolina knows far more about this than I do, but we're working definitely, I think, to create a new generation of food and drink brands at the moment. It feels like we're in a bit of a transitionary period where we're sort of creating a lot of substitutes. So for the last few years, we've been working with the brands that we work with to sort of think about how they can evolve, and telling our meat producing clients to think differently and think beyond products like that. But it feels like we're going to end up with a completely new set of types of food and diet that we're eating as well. Obviously, just building on what you were saying of the 20 to 50,000 types of plant species that are edible, we eat 150 types, I think. And so actually sort of looking at the fact that we'll have a completely different menu in the future of reappraising our resources, but creating very different diets. We were talking yesterday in the studio about the problem that convenience food has created, but we can't leave it behind with our diet. So actually, what will the future of a healthily designed convenience menu, how will that look? So I think, and especially the work that we do here in our San Francisco studio, I was just saying to Manuela and Carolina that actually whenever we're doing trends work with London, New York, we see about maybe a 3 or 4 year lag as the brands catch up. But here, it's trying to chase what the San Francisco studio are working on most of the time to give them the right context.
Yeah, we have everything from Impossible Meats and Sipsmith non-alcoholic spirits and all kinds of other things that are sort of coming to the forefront. Manuela, what are you most excited about in landscape and architecture?
Well, this isn't landscape or architecture, but this is here today. I think this cross-disciplinary innovation is incredibly exciting. So I feel like the odd person out in this room as a landscape architect, but we have so much to bring to each other, and it's really interesting to hear about food and branding and everything and how it all ties together, that we can change the world. I'm also excited about the authenticity direction that people are going back towards really ecological solutions as opposed to kind of an art approach to the landscape, which for a while, I'd say in the 80s and 90s, it was very much about an art and an imprint of a specific design. Now that matters much less than being authentic and good to the earth. And that's exciting.
Awesome. Well, staying on you, what is one of the biggest challenges, as a team, you guys are working on, or something that we know that we have to sort of overcome during this process?
I think there are two challenges. One is the political environment. And I was saying to someone at lunch, to John, that we're in a bubble here in San Francisco, and even a more micro bubble in this room of people who are open to innovation. But in a lot of my projects, which spread all across the country and the world, there are a lot of people who don't care. They still care about the bottom line, or less about the environment than something that affects them more, obviously, directly and immediately. And we need to get people to think about the long term, and that means changing the political environment as well. So that's a challenge.
Caroline, what is one of your biggest challenges you see in food for healthy future?
I think getting
just your work, even.
Yeah, getting people to try something new. How many, I think all of you have done it at least once, is when you say like, oh no, I don't eat that, because you think it's going to be disgusting or just not to your palate. And often it's not, it's surprisingly not. And I think that's for me the most difficult thing, is when I propose something, a lot of people will say no just by the thought of it. And I have my mom as an example. If I get her to try it and she likes it, then I think the majority will.
The same as kids, right?
Yeah.
If you just try it, my grandma used to say, you don't have to eat it all, but you have to taste it.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think it's uniting really the viewpoints of different generations, because I think just building on what you were saying, you will get different mindsets within one brand of, and maybe an older demographic who thinks that change can't happen, and then younger demographics that are really pushing for it and really believe in it. And I think, we are living in a time of massive change. I mean, forecasting is much harder than it used to be in terms
Because it changes faster.
Yeah, super fast, and I think, we used to see that sort of rate of change, particularly in things like food and drink, because there's so much legislation for a brand to go through and the route to market, but now it's happening faster and faster. But actually sort of creating products that multi-generations buy into. Thank you for the shout out. We actually created Seedlip, the brand, the non-alc brand, a while ago, and I think that was an exciting time for us because it was actually answering the needs of a younger generation who aren't drinking, for example. And actually sort of that period of education, is that brand, we didn't know it would have the effect that it did when we created it, and that there was such a big audience of people that are ready to not drink, and it's been super exciting to see its journey.
I'm very excited for the new Negroni that's coming out.
Yeah, the no grony. Yeah.
No grony.
The no grony, I know. So I just have two more questions before we open it back up to questions, but what or who are you looking to for inspiration in your work for sustainability? Anybody?
I'll answer that. I have a daughter that is Generation Z, which is born after 1995, and she always inspires me with her openness to new thinking, new ideas. I mean, everything is fluid in the new generation, and everything is possible, and that to me is a huge inspiration.
That's awesome. Anybody else? Inspiration.
Yeah, for me, it has to be chefs, young chefs, because being a chef means that you have to have a lot of passion. The hours are not great and the salary is not fantastic. Even people like René Redzepi, they don't make money with having Noma, for example. So they're full of passion, and I think looking at them, for me, it's very good to understand, okay, what are the new trends in food? At least, are we going to pickle, ferment, or like now he has in Noma, I don't know if you know that restaurant, I think it's great, but they have the fully veggie menu 3 months of the year. And I hear it's actually the best one.
No, that's awesome. And there's so many chefs now that are actually starting their own farms or collaborating and working with farmers. There's actually one multi-Michelin star chef here in the city who had Saison, and he has left the restaurant and is just doing basically dinners at his ranch where he is farming or hunting or fishing for all of the food that he's putting on the table. I can't afford the dinner, but it looks amazing.
I think one of the things that when we were talking about this question, I was sort of thinking about it a lot. And actually, what I think is really inspiring at the moment is some of the big brands that we all know and what they're doing internally to drive change within their organizations. So I was thinking about names like the Airbnb Healthier holiday initiative that they have, where they're regenerating towns that have become quiet. There's lovely examples in, say, Japan, Italy, where they've been doing that to regenerate villages that younger generations have moved away to.
No, I'm just saying, especially the towns in Italy, like I have tried so hard to convince like a group of friends who's in with me to buy like the house for $500 so we can just like have our own village. It would be amazing. But they're trying to bring people back into the smaller towns and villages. Yeah.
Yeah, and my father comes from one of those villages in Italy, and I think, when we go back there, it's not the village I remember visiting as a child. And so actually initiatives like that are driven by big companies, and IKEA Space 10 with what they're doing with the foods of the future and the lifestyles of the future. It's responsible behavior. Patagonia's Action Works, the fact that they've given $100 million to their grantees is incredible. And I think, more and more when we're thinking about, again, designing brands, it's always, and it's obvious stuff to you all, but it's, what does this product do for the individual? What does it do for the community? And then what's the legacy this is going to leave? And as simple as those questions are and as obvious, we didn't used to design brands like that, and actually that obligation to leave a positive legacy is so important now.
And I think as designers, that's part of our opportunity and responsibility, is to have those conversations with our clients. Manuela, any big inspiration that you're looking towards?
Other than my daughter. So,
Other than what?
other than my daughter.
Oh,
Jenna.
I just didn't know if there was any others. Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm inspired by nature, of course, being in the profession that I'm in. I'm inspired by art. I'm inspired by people who are open-minded and forward-thinking.
Awesome. Any last takeaways that you want to make sure that this creative community, by the way, the sun is coming out, it's making my day right now. Any final takeaways that you want to make sure that the audience sort of thinks about as we go beyond into a healthier future?
Well, oh, sorry.
Oh, please.
I think it's really, really amazing. I know I've been talking about sausage. It's a bit of the medium which I have been talking through lately, or the last 2 years. But think about it. It's 5,000 years old. And I just wanted to throw this in because it has 5,000 years of development. And 5,000 years ago, we have decided to be efficient with our food and create this object. And it's still virtually the same around us. And that in this day and age where everything goes so fast, I think you will not look at the next sausage the same again like this.
Especially if you look at some of these really great photos that are pictures from her book that have been coming up on the screen. They're sausages with grains and with vegetables and fruits and other ingredients. So can you tell everyone where to get the book?
Well, it's called The Sausage of the Future. I think it's on Amazon. It's by Lars Müller Publishers. It's a great publishing house from Switzerland. But if you have troubles and you want to buy it, please let me know. I can find you the nearest purchase spots.
Awesome. Any takeaways, Sophie, for you?
It just builds on everything that we saw this morning, really, which was, it's an incredible morning of people sharing, their really intimate thoughts on change and connection and communication with each other. And I think, just some of the really interesting statistics that I've seen is on how empowered audiences feel now. You've got statistics which are super high, like 90% of people will push back against brands with deceptive practices or practices that they don't agree with. People really feel that they can have that opinion now. And I read another that was 96% of UK, US audiences feel really that they can action change. And I think just after watching some of the talks this morning, that's at the root of all of this now, is that actually we have the power to have an opinion heard as consumers, or whatever we're called when we get our new name. But it's a really exciting time to push for that change that you want to see from brands.
Manuela, takeaways from you?
I would say that the earth and the environment are in the middle of a huge transformational change, the biggest that has ever happened on the earth, with population growth and climate change and sea level rise and scarcity of water and massive migration. And we are all in this together. It takes all of the creative minds of everyone to solve this problem. And I appreciate the fact that there are so many people here who are forward thinkers.
Awesome. So we have a couple minutes left for Q&A. Do we have a couple microphones? Any questions? Comments? Additions? Silence. Everyone's in a food coma. In the front here? Yeah, it's coming right behind you. Yep.
Is it on? Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for your talk. So I have an anecdote maybe that you might be able to speak to. I had a front lawn. I thought I was being smart. I put on some garden boxes, so that way I didn't have to water the grass and waste water. And then I started growing some fruits and vegetables, which I thought would be smart because it'd be sustainable. I could use my compost bin finally. I would water it. I think this was during the drought, California. I would use my water from the bathtub to warm it up, but use that cold water to water it. And I thought it would be really cool because it would be like kind of educational, because kids would see strawberries and they would pick them and eat them. They didn't know where strawberries came from. Lemon trees, they kind of grow like weeds in California. But what I realized, some of my crops wouldn't grow ever again, or they stopped growing, until a hippie friend of mine told me, well, because I didn't have any ladybugs to kill off some of the insects, and I didn't have any bees to cross-pollinate. So then I was kind of like stopped there, and so that's my anecdote in terms of like, I thought I had this really great interdisciplinary plan and educational plan, but at some place along the line, I needed to up my game, and I wasn't because I don't have those insects.
Yeah, insects are really fucking important. I'm sorry. As much as I hate a spider, like bees and ladybugs and spiders and flies and the snakes and like the whole entire ecosystem that we all are like, ew, and go away. Like we actually really, really need them so much. I know that there is a couple of brands here in the city kind of speaking to the farm on the roof deck or urban gardening. There's so many buildings in San Francisco that have bee hives on the roofs. There's a company, I think it's called Bay Area Bee, I gotta look it up, but basically you can actually get honey from the different neighborhoods, so it's that sort of narrowed down. But anything you want to add?
In preparing for this talk, I was looking at all the statistics about environmental change. 40% of all known insects are on the verge of extinction. 40% of all known insects. 1 million species are on the verge of extinction. And, you know, those are terrifying facts, but you're right. It's all a system. It's all integrated. You can't separate plants from animals, from people, from materials, from climate change. And so, you know, we appreciate the small steps, of course. We all have to take those small steps, but there are bigger systems that we also have to be aware of.
It's time to make friends with a beekeeper.
Yes.
There's a question over here.
One question that I have as I'm listening to you talk about your various practices is how, when you're dealing with big corporations where shareholder value is literally number one, how do you convince them to spend more on initiatives that are sustainable? I mean, you know, in my experience, it's been hard to get people on board with it, and it sounds like, at least in the small set, there's a shift, and I'm wondering how that's getting past the bean counters.
I have two answers for
Go
that.
for it.
I do a lot of work with very large corporations. All the names that you all know and use every day, I'm doing campuses for. They are the more forward-thinking people about ecological design, and they are willing to spend the money to do ecological designs for their campuses, for their employees, to make a positive effect in the world. Where the challenge is smaller scale cities, public clients that don't see the value in it. So the corporations, I think, are ahead of communities.
I think to that note, I mean, sustainability is becoming the better business model. So if giant businesses like BlackRock are saying, we will not give you funding unless this is part of your plan, I think it's starting to change, and it's slow, but it also, again, comes back to the consumers having to make those choices with their dollars, us as designers and creatives educating those consumers on the benefits and the differences. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but I agree that it has to come, you know, from the big money down for sure. Any other questions? There's one in the back. Yeah. Right behind you. Yep.
Shout it. There it is. Right on. Hey, in a lot of design work, we often hear, especially in hospitality or spatial design, you hear experiential thrown around a lot. Yeah, I'm sort of asking you to futurecast here, but if I have to hear a client tell me one more time that they're all about the experience, and the experience turns into an Instagram post, which really isn't an experience, it's actually the exact opposite of that, what's next? Even if it's just a new label for that word, everybody's designing experiences now. I know that that's not a word that was thrown around 20 years ago like it is today, so what 20 years from now will we be talking about? Because it feels like experience has kind of run its course, or at this point is kind of status quo.
Sophie, anything for you? Because brands are kind of leading that experience conversation.
Yeah, we actually did a big think piece last year, because in exactly the same conversations that you're having, we kept having clients coming in saying, we want to create a lifestyle brand. We'd be like, okay, that sounds cool. Does that mean you can do everything you want to do and just innovate forever? What are the parameters of that? And actually, it's very easy to totally confuse your consumers to what you're actually delivering to them and your place in the market. And from that, I don't have an answer for you for what the next terminology will be, but it made us really rethink, I think, the positioning of our agency. And we started talking about how we're designing for life rather than lifestyle. That lifestyle was such an aesthetic term, it was so surface, that actually we need to really properly consider the role of this brand in someone's life and what it should be delivering. And give it clear purpose and a clear positioning in the market, and think about the right touch points for it to affect, and not do that. That we're considering the proper route to consumer, and actually, what makes sense for this brand, how should it manifest itself, and not to just jump on the latest bandwagon of direct-to-consumer or whatever, everyone's seen everyone else successfully doing. So I think, we're trying to be mindful and more reductive in our approach when we're creating brands now, and design for life, and how that's changing.
And I think to Manuela's point also about, so like a shopping center area, people are still shopping online, but they need and want to be together. Mm-hmm. So how do brands and businesses create those experiences for people to connect in real life? It's like the dinners, it's, cooking together, it's coming together in person. I think, the Instagrammable moments is fine. It gets exposure and they're pretty and I love to look at them, but sometimes, and this comes from brands both big and small, even sometimes asking people to turn that phone off and actually having the experience rather than just proving that they've been there and sharing it out. So those kinds of things are coming across, I think, in all three of your platforms.
But I do think that this sort of Instagrammable things that you're doing pulls people out of their homes and got people to do stuff again. Because I agree with you. Now the next step is to experience it fully yourself, and that should be enough, like with the group that you are. But at least we're out there again, and we're enjoying the environment, and we're just having fun together.
Awesome. Any more questions? Fantastic. Okay, so I assume that Antoinette is still in transit.
She is going to make it.
Woohoo!
Yes.
Okay, so we're shuffling some things around, but thank you so much, ladies, for the panel, and we'll go ahead and switch over.